thank you all for joining today, whether you're here in the webinar meeting or watching on the recording. We appreciate all you taking the time to join in on this conversation, and we really hope that this is a valuable conversation for everybody and something that can be engaging and valuable. As many of you know, today we're going to be talking about navigating the future of work, remote versus in person. As we know, the modern workforce has changed in many different ways. And as people who are blind or visually impaired, there are unique challenges or just things to keep in mind as we navigate our employment journeys wherever we may be at. Awesome. So real quick, Laverne and I are going to be the presenters today. Just to give a very quick introduction of myself, my name is Blake, and I am the growth manager for Clusive, and I help lead marketing. Laverne, do you want to give a quick introduction?
Yeah, I'm Laverne Dell. I am the student success representative. So basically, I assist students in navigating our courses with Clusive.
Awesome. And then Alana is also here and will be helping with the chat. If anybody has any questions that comes up, Alana, do you want to say hi real quick?
Yeah, hi, I'm Alana Clancy. I'm the government liaison for Clusive. Super excited to support Blake and Laverne. And yeah, if you have any questions, you can chat it and I'll help filter that and reply or stop Blake so they can help answer this.
Awesome. Thanks, Alana and Laverne. So really quick, just to introduce this topic at a high level, what is even the point of having this conversation? As many of you are aware, the modern workforce has changed quite dramatically in the past couple of years. There are now so many more remote job opportunities, people working from home, and in-person work is still an option and still a majority of the work. But as we've seen in the past couple of years, there's been a big shift in remote work opportunities, which has been great, has opened up more opportunities for people like myself to work remotely. But there are a variety of accessibility barriers and certain challenges that we can face even when working remotely. And we want to dive into what are the differences so you can understand what would be the best fit for you and in your career journey and whatever path in employment that you're on. Also, who is this for? Really anybody in the blind community. Wherever you're at in your journey, we want to make sure that this can be a engaging conversation. And we hope in the end, you can take away some important understandings of the difference between remote and in-person work, what's best for you, and understand the nuances and have some tips and strategies on how you could overcome certain challenges that can occur in either remote or in-person work. And then Laverne, do you want to give a quick note on just kind of Q&A throughout and how we want to handle that and at the end?
Yeah, so if you have a question and you want to put it in the chat, go ahead. Alana will let us know. We will also take questions at the end. We're a small group, so if somebody has a question in the middle, you can raise your hand. Typically, the Control Y will allow you to raise your hand if you're on a PC. I apologize, I don't know the Mac command. If somebody knows the command for Macs and they're using a Mac, if you want to put it in the chat, that would be great. But we will call on people throughout since we're a small group, and we'll also take questions at the end.
Awesome. That sounds great. And also note, this is brought to you by Clusive, and we are an e-learning platform built for the blind community. And we want to help prepare people for the modern workforce. So if you are curious to learn more about Clusive and how we can help you in navigating your career path as it relates to remote or in-person work, we can share more on that later. And one last thing for introductions, just to understand who you're listening to. and why even listen to us. So I grew up with perfect vision, and at the age of 16, a condition called LHON caused me to go through severe central vision loss. And throughout that journey, I have worked quite a variety of in-person jobs. I have gone to college both in person and online. I have worked a variety of professional roles in my career path, in person and remotely, and they have all brought their unique challenges. And I have had to learn many of those things the hard way. I've had the support of a lot of others in my journey through that, and have helped supported other blind friends in their process with this topic. And I currently do work remotely and use a variety of assistive technology. So that's just a bit about me on kind of where I come from and my experience on this topic. Laverne, do you want to really quick share your background as it
Sure.
relates to this conversation?
Sure. So I had retinoblastoma when I was 2, so I've been totally blind since I was 2. I worked for Voc Rehab for 30 years, both in person and then with COVID hybrid, and now I work remotely. So I've seen all sides of the working experience, in person, hybrid, remotely, all the challenges that I've faced. And we realize that folks will have different experiences because that's how it is with people. You have different experiences, but we'll share what we have experienced and some thoughts along the way as folks go into this journey of what's the best fit is really what it comes down to. What's the best fit for each person as far as the work environment?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Laverne. Sweet. So a couple of things just to know kind of the outline. We're going to first talk about exploring in-person work, navigating challenges, advantages, and how to overcome some of those challenges. Then we'll do the same with exploring remote work. What are the challenges, how to overcome them, and what are some of the benefits? And then comparing the two and assessing, what would be best for you. And we can jump into it. So first, for in-person work, just so we're all on the same page, Laverne, how would you define in-person work and the key characteristics before we get into some of the advantages and challenges?
So in-person work would be going into an office, going into a work site, whether it is construction, a library, whatever that is, you're actually going to a place to perform the work.
Perfect. Yeah, that's quite obvious, but we just want to make sure we're all on the same page, differentiating the two. So first, to look at some of the advantages of in-person work opportunities, I think the first thing that I think of is having a closer community and just connections with coworkers. And this is obviously because you're coming across people day in and day out, and you're getting to rub shoulders with people and have those, water cooler conversations. And work can be a place where you can find friendship, community with other people. The collaboration is can be more efficient if people are right next to you, and that can definitely be an advantage to have. It can also provide more structure and routine to your day, because when you're working in person, there's normally a time that you have to be at work by and a time you have to leave at. There is an accountability when you're working in person, and it can help to have that structure or routine, especially if you are having to get transportation. You know when you got to be there, you know when you got to leave, and the day can be a bit more have a bit more of a structured format. There also it also could potentially be a more focused environment if you have an office setup, a place you go just to work, versus, when I say this, because compared to working at home, there could be more distractions. We'll kind of compare all these advantages to some of the challenges as well, but it can potentially have more focus because you got your workplace as your workplace and an environment that is set up for work. Laverne, what other thoughts do you have on advantages, whether expanding on some of those points or additional thoughts?
So some other advantages are, let's say you have a bad moment, you have a bad phone call, or you screwed something up. You have coworkers close by. You can always go find somebody and cry on somebody's shoulder, if you will, or get help and suggestions pretty quickly. You won't have that readily in remote work. The other thing that you have is your setup, your assistive technology, if you're using assistive technology, is all set. And although it's not your coworker's job to help you with your work per se, you may have a reader, you may have other accommodations, but let's say that no matter what you do, you can't get your computer to work. You can always see if somebody has a moment to come in and say, oh, well, this is what's happening, or gee, the power strip is totally black, or whatever's going on. You might get some quick assistance and not need to struggle with that. So there is some advantages along that line. It really just comes down to, as human beings, we are a social kind of group, and we'll get more into this when we get to remote work. You don't have the isolation. And I do have more when we get to disadvantages, but in-person work does definitely have its advantages,
Yeah,
but it's
no,
not right for everyone.
yeah, that's a good point of having that quick sighted support, or however you want to put it, as things come up. And anybody, any coworker is going to be able to more quickly get whatever support it is that they may need real quick, and be able to have that quick tech question. I feel like that's a really good point to bring up. So when looking at some of the challenges of in-person work, what are some of the first things that comes top of mind to you, Laverne?
So some of the things that can be challenging in person, one is getting there. If you are a
Yeah.
bus traveler, no matter if you have a disability or not, you are at the mercy of the bus system, and bus systems are at the mercy of employees having drivers, weather issues, traffic issues. Um, who wants to get to work an hour early just so you're not late because the bus couldn't run? Or there have been times when a bus is overfilled and you had to wait for the next one. So traveling via bus is a challenge. Traveling via Uber has its challenges, whether it's financial challenges, availability, they won't pick you up, whatever it is. So just getting to and from work can be a challenge for anyone with or without a disability. The other aspects can be back to the coworkers. Those people who are supportive can also be problematic. You had to put your lunch in the refrigerator and you had to find your lunch. Well, if folks move it around, you can't find it, or no matter who you are, somebody may eat your lunch, and that's another problem. So there are issues in working in the workplace, being in the actual workplace or at the actual work site.
Yeah, those are good points. I think my mind definitely goes right away to transportation challenges. I think that's like many of these points is a whole conversation in itself as well. Some other challenges that I think of in this conversation can sometimes just be like the physical accessibility of a place. How is it navigating the in-person work environment? It can totally depend on the business, but sometimes your space can be moved around in your office if it's shared with other people. Sometimes you may have to go through the warehouse, and the warehouse could be unorganized. Or it could be like, hey, we're meeting in this room and you've never been to that room, and you have to hook up your laptop for a presentation. Um, these are all random examples that I've had to try to navigate, and it can provide unique challenges, and it's not, there's definitely ways to figure it out, but when getting around new spaces or as spaces are changed, it can be confusing or throw certain curveballs. This is kind of a random one, but something I just thought of personally. I um, I can sometimes, I don't like, always like using my assistive technology on other people, whether it's I just want my screen reader to play out loud, or I feel weird magnifying my screen while others are watching. And so it can be a bit uncomfortable at times, or there can be a bit more work to figure out the best assistive technology setup. Um, Also, it can depend on there could be different technologies you may have to work with that, for example, you may have to go work on another computer for whatever reason, and it doesn't have your assistive technology on it, which can be a challenge if you maybe, sometimes you could be like, oh, let me just turn on Windows Narrator or Magnifier and start using it, but definitely not ideal when having to potentially work on a different device that could come up. So there can be some of those assistive technology challenges to work through. And then looking at overcoming some of those challenges when it comes to in-person work, because there's going to be challenges no matter where you are, but it's about finding those clever solutions or workarounds to be able to overcome things. So this, I think, probably will be a whole other conversation we'll have in the future, but Laverne, how do you think you can handle some of the in-person challenges when it comes to getting reasonable accommodations, just at a high level?
What one wants to do is to be proactive instead of reactive. And that's not something you can do 100% of the time, but a majority of the time. So when you start a job or you're on a job and you discover that you need some accommodations, find out the process. What is the process for requesting that accommodation? What are the timelines for getting that accommodation? Because they don't happen instantly. And in the meantime, how can I still be productive at this job? So being proactive, gathering information, and being a self-advocate. Knowing the rules of the workplace, those unwritten rules are what'll get you in more trouble than the written ones, because we can all read the written ones one way or another. But it's those unwritten rules of you go into the conference room and everybody has been there forever and they all have their special seat where they sit, and you go in and you sit in somebody's seat, and then they come in and they're glaring and they're unhappy and they slam their stuff down. So knowing those unwritten rules, where do people sit? Who buys coffee? How does that work? Be proactive, ask questions, find out the pulse of the workplace is really your
Yes,
best bet.
definitely. I think, that was another thought I had in point here of understanding the culture of the organization that you're working for, because, maybe transportation is a challenge, and you find out, you have to be at work between 8 and 5, let's say, but the bus can only get you there at 8:45 and leaves at 5:45, something like that. If you realize that the culture is slightly flexible, of, the time people show up and leave is flexible, but as long as people get their work done and put in their hours, when you show up and leave can be flexible. If you understand that about your culture and you communicate that to your boss, that is in ways getting an accommodation or just having a way that people can better work with around the challenges that you may be facing, because not every accommodation needs to be part of some HR policy. It can just be understanding the culture and just communicating things with people.
And Blake,
When
if
it
I could
comes
throw
to,
in there, sorry.
yeah, no, go ahead, Laverne.
So if if you're someone with a disability and you need accommodations, there's something else to keep in mind. Other people need things too. So for me, I'm totally blind. I can be in an office without the light on. But my coworkers need that light, and they need that light not just so they can walk in and see me, but if there's a safety issue, when there's a safety issue in an office building, people run through the building looking for lights on to get people out. Usually there's something more organized for evacuating a building, but the bottom line is a light on in an office means somebody's there. So they know to look for you if you're not in your office, to account for you. My point being is there's accommodations that I, as a person who has a disability, needs, but my coworkers need accommodations as well. And those aren't in writing. They're givens. People have the given that lights will be on when someone's in an office. So keep that in mind too.
Definitely. It reminds me of one job I had where I shared an office with somebody that was at their desk part of the time, at their desk or somewhere else in the office the other part of the time. And, I would get eye fatigue throughout the day and want to dim the fluorescent lights. But then when they came in, it was kind of like oddly dim and darker. And so they would, there was never a problem. Like they didn't really care if I dimmed it, but I felt like it was respectful to brighten them and not have them feel sad in this dark room. But it was a random thing I would have never thought of to have to navigate. Um, and yeah, we'll get into comparing more with remote work later, but a couple other things for overcoming challenges. I think always looking to create an optimal environment for your assistive technology and, excuse me, finding the right technology for you. I think it's important to constantly be figuring this out and understand what does a company already have that can be useful. I've had jobs where I wanted an external monitor for my personal laptop, and the company just had extras laying around no one used. I was able to use it. Just didn't cost the company any extra money. Maybe for one, they had to get uh, a HDMI cable converter, but that's under $10. And they were really happy to help because it made me more productive and just got resourceful with with what was already there, but always continue to figure out your best technology setup is going to be really beneficial in talking uh, with your boss and coworkers to figure that process out. And then as it comes to transportation, trying to figure out just the best process, whether it's public transportation or it's looking for jobs that are on the way to the work of a family member or anybody you may live with. I've done certain jobs where it's been on the way to where a family member has to go that day or just close to home. There's been a lot of interesting things to try to figure out. There's also as you build relationships with coworkers, there's carpooling, and I think it just constantly figuring out the best transportation. But even when you are applying and looking places, although this can feel like a limiting factor, it's going to be really important to look at how reasonable is the transportation, whether it's public transit, getting a ride from someone you live with that is not out of their way but on their way, or the Uber, Lyft, any of those options. Could be a whole other conversation in itself, but those are just kind of a couple of things I think of as it comes to transportation. Before moving on to remote work, was there any questions that anybody had on that? Just want to give a quick pause for that. Cool. Just wanted to check. If not, we can continue the conversation at the end here and move into remote work and the evolving workforce. Just a couple points before we get into this. Remote work is this kind of interesting, newer phenomena, and just a couple interesting facts to know. 82% of interviews are conducted remotely, whether in person or remote role. 82% are going to be conducted virtually. And so, no matter what, very likely that you're going to have some virtual or remote means of being interviewed. There are 3 times the amount of remote job opportunities since 2020. As we know, the pandemic changed a lot of things and opened up a lot of remote work, slightly forced to have to do this. But also, since the pandemic, a lot of companies have evolved to either have a fully remote, a hybrid option, or move back to in person. But there's been a huge increase in person or in remote work, and 16% of companies operate fully remotely. And this number is going to continue to grow. As I mentioned, a lot of companies will have hybrid options. So the hybrid number is going to be much bigger than this, but that was interesting how many companies are not even in person. And not too long ago, that would sound pretty insane. So for remote work, just to quickly define this, working remotely is going to be any job where you are not going in person to an office, and pretty much what we would consider working from home. Technically, you could go work at a coffee shop or wherever you want with a remote job, but it's what we think of when we work remotely from home, connecting virtually to do our tasks on a computer or whatever it may be. First, to go through some of the advantages. Laverne, what are kind of the top advantages you think of when it comes to remote work?
All right, so advantages. You don't have to travel to work, or you don't have far to travel. Maybe it's just across the
Right.
room, which gives you some more time at the beginning or end of your day. Um, the setting, it's you can have your setup, nobody messes with it. You don't have to deal with some of the interpersonal stuff that you might deal with in an office. And I think another advantage is you don't, depending on who you are, I've had some micromanagers in my time of work. You may have a micromanager, but they're not over your shoulder. They're not walking in your office. So just to throw out a few.
Definitely. That'd be some next level micromanaging if they did walk in.
That would be awkward.
Yes. No, those are some great points. And I think some other areas I think of is an advantage, and there's definitely a flip side to this we'll talk to, is there can be more flexibility and independence. It's I could start whenever I want, I could end whenever I want. In terms of my computer is always there to log into, and I don't have to, it's not that I have no schedule and structure to my day, but it's you can work whenever you want because you just need your computer. So that can create more flexibility and independence with the hours you have, and to be able to work around whatever may come up in your life. Something that I think is super cool about remote work is this gives you such a broader access to job opportunities. You're not constrained just by the area you live in. And I think for many people, they first think, oh, yeah, it's great. You can have a job anywhere in the country. Yes, I think that's really cool. But also for us in the blind community, there's so many jobs just in my area I wouldn't pursue due to physical transportation challenges or um, yeah, that it if I can't get there easily, I wouldn't pursue it. But that may be a no-brainer of a job opportunity for somebody to apply for that can drive. So I think the range of job opportunities is so cool to where Laverne and I can work for a company based in Austin with some people in person, like Alana, but I live in San Diego, and Laverne doesn't live. It lives in Colorado, um, and not in Texas. So it's just cool to see kind of this different range of job opportunities that this can open up. And then when it comes to yeah, travel, there's obviously reduced. You're not dealing with the challenge with having the challenges of transportation. Um, you can, yeah, as Laverne mentioned, create a setup at home that could definitely be more suitable for your needs. I feel like I've slowly created quite the awesome, comfortable setup for myself, which I really appreciate.
And just to throw out there, Blake, this is where it's really important when you're doing your job search to read the criteria around the job. Some jobs will say they're remote, but you have to go into the office once a month. Well, I've seen jobs in Arizona that I'd really like, but there's no way I'm driving to Arizona or flying to Arizona or paying for transportation to Arizona to go into the office for 1 day a month. So make sure you read the descriptions around the work environment. Some are remote, some are hybrid, some you have to come into the office once a month, some never.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And yeah, I think there can be a lot of very cool sounding advantages to remote work, and there are. And I think having a disability, there it can just be a lot more comfortable navigating certain things, and there's a lot of challenges you just don't have to deal with when in comparison to in-person work. But there are challenges to it. Laverne, what comes to your mind when you think of some of these challenges?
So a couple of challenges with your assistive technology. First of all, you're going to want to make sure that you're set up and good to go with what you need. So there's communication again with your employer. But if things go wrong, you don't have somebody nearby who can necessarily come and quick help you. Now, there are some services for folks who are blind. There is Aira, that is a cost service. There is Be My Eyes, but that is volunteer and you're not guaranteed confidentiality. So there is some potential workarounds. You can also FaceTime some of your coworkers if somebody's available to help you out and tell you what's going on. Some other challenges really have to do with there's a cost. So you may have to pay for your own internet, where when you're in the office, the employer pays for that. You may have to pay for your own phone service, when you're in the office, that's covered by the employer. The other things that are really critical is the environment. Not everybody has an ideal setup where they can work from home and have more of a business setup if they're in a Zoom meeting. However, you can always use backgrounds and change that. But you want to make sure you have some good ergonomic setups for yourself. Either use a virtual background or that your background is appropriate. You want to make sure, and we've all heard the stories from COVID, right? Where people show up not attired correctly, or their background is really bad, or they forget to mute. You have to keep all those things in mind, where when you're working in person and you're going to meetings in person, you don't have to worry about that, because you're not going to say some things in a meeting that you might say under your breath at home when you're on mute, right? So those are some challenges. Some other challenges that I think gets overlooked. We've talked a lot about transportation, but for someone who is blind or low vision, one part about transportation is you're using your travel skills. You either have to go out your front door and get to the Uber or Lyft, or you have to get to your bus stop, and you're using your skills. Mobility skills or travel skills, whatever you call them, are use it or lose it kind of skills, because it also involves confidence, and the world changes. So if you are at home and you're working remotely, you want to make sure you get out and walk around, use those skills, so that you don't lose them. And that's not always, it takes some doing to say, okay, I'm going to just go out and take a walk today. It's more than just exercise. You're retaining your skills.
Yeah, I thought that was such a good point you brought up when we were discussing this, because I feel like for myself, I can just get too comfortable in all these nice perks of working remotely. And then when I face having to use my assistive technology on someone else, give, having to speak in person to a group, whatever these things may be that I would do in normal in-person work, which I haven't done in quite a long time. Um, it's like, it's funny. We're like, oh, this is so much more uncomfortable, but it's like, oh, I just need to practice and keep doing it more. So I think that applies to so many things to keep being mindful of.
One other
So,
thing that happens, sorry, Blake, I keep
no,
talking
good.
over you. One other
No,
thing that
you're good.
happens is in these remote meetings, like all of you guys are all muted right now. So you might be, making faces going, wow, what I'm in this. Or you might be thinking, this is a great thing. There's no way for me to tell how your reaction is, because we have to all be muted or you don't hear the webinar. And that's the same case when you're in an interview. You can't necessarily tell the reaction of the interviewer or the interview panel because everybody's muted. Where when you're in person, you can tell when somebody's writing. You can tell when somebody's flipping their pen around or being restless in their chair. You don't have that advantage in a remote setting.
Yeah, that's a great point. Some other things I think of too is you can sometimes have some unique accessibility barriers when you're working remotely. The tasks are quite fully virtual, and it's been great that there's more software and tools to use. Some of the most common tools have improved their accessibility quite a bit in the recent years, but there are just so many different softwares that you have to use and get access to. And it can be a lot to learn, a lot to figure out. And sometimes they're just not accessible. And you have to work with your employer to figure out an accessible solution. Uh, that could be a whole other conversation of advocating for accessibility. But you may have an ideal setup. On the other hand, there could be a lot of different softwares you may have to use, which could provide some unique challenges. And then I think just I I can find that although you are still having meetings or things throughout your day, it can be less structured when you don't have a defined place you go for work. And I feel as though being disciplined and setting up a good environment is so key. And lastly, I think reinforcing that it can feel isolating, or you can feel like you have less connection with coworkers if you're not, rubbing shoulders constantly, being around people in person. That can be definitely challenging with remote work opportunities. And so a couple notes just on how to overcome some of those challenges. I would just want to kind of dive into that real quick. Laverne, from some of the challenges that we faced, whether it's feeling disconnected, technology challenges, or whatever else, how do you feel like we can work through overcoming some of those barriers?
So again, with the technology pieces, make sure you're proactive. If you start finding you're having issues with technology at home, you want to make sure you let your supervisor know, and also consider other factors that may help you out. FaceTiming if your supervisor has an iPhone, you can FaceTime your supervisor. You can look at also possibly using Ira or Be My Eyes. And it might just be because it happens to everyone. This is not something that is specific to disabilities. Might just be that you are down for a period of time. If your internet goes out, what are you going to do? I mean, unless you have a hotspot on your phone, you're really kind of down for a while, and you have to, let your supervisor know that. Um, for the isolation piece, consider getting involved. Doesn't mean you have to go join some club. You could even go to the gym. You could just go out to a coffee shop if there's one nearby. If you go to a place enough, people start to know you and start to talk to you, and you get some social interaction. So get involved. Don't stay home and stay locked in your own head. That's never a good thing for any of us. Yeah, we're social beings. You need that social interaction. Even if you're an introvert, you need some social interaction.
Yes, well said. And a couple other things. I think always trying to create a good office setup at home and making sure that you are learning your assistive technology well and just creating an environment that you can work well in, that, for productivity's sake, also for functionality's sake, with whatever assistive technology that you use is going to be super important. And this is a continual thing. I am constantly learning how to best optimize. And I think it helps to have other friends in the blind community to ask them what works for them and getting support. Also, you're going to sometimes have to advocate for accessibility, and whether it's with the products that you use, the different software tools, or whatever it may be, I think that's definitely a skill that is going to have to be brought up. And I think, Laverne, you brought up great ways of just staying connected with coworkers, or also just getting out is, super duper important. And so those are all great points. So before we wrap things up and kind of get into Q&A, just want to leave everybody with just what is best for you and how to figure this out. I think a couple key areas to look at is assessing your personality. When looking at the pros and cons, you could look at, are you somebody that is super extroverted, loves being around people, and would really want to work in person? Or are you really self-oriented with certain tasks and could be disciplined working remotely? You could, if you are extroverted, you could even find that remotely still, but you would want to see, would I be working on a team and with others as well? But I think there's a lot of different areas of your personality to look at. I think looking at your skill sets and what skills you have, and does that best align with certain jobs that are done remotely, and do you have good computer skills? Do you have different skills that would be better for different types of in-person work? I think there's a lot to look at there, and you could look at just different job postings of remote versus in-person and see where your skills better aligned. Also, which works better for your career path? Do you want to have the flexibility in your life of working remotely, or do you feel like remote work is going to open you up to more jobs and be able to grow more? Or are you looking for an entry-level position, which seems more reasonable? I'd say assessing your personality, your skill set, and your career path is really going to help figure out which of these is best for you, and keeping in mind the different challenges that may come up that we all can deal with when navigating these things as people who are blind or low vision. Laverne, any kind of final thoughts in those areas that people can take away when looking at comparing these areas?
I think you covered them all.
Cool.
There may be more, but you covered the ones I could think of.
Awesome. Yeah, that's yes. We could definitely talk about this all day. So, last thing before we do questions and answers, if you're looking to get equipped for employment in the modern workforce and are wanting to learn more about how to improve your technology, your career, or occupational skills, at Clusive we have online courses on our accessible e-learning platform that you can take that are designed for the blind community. These can help you with technology skills for different business softwares in the modern workforce. You can explore different career paths and opportunities like customer service, computer science, or being an accessibility analyst. We also have content about preparing for remote interviews, and all of our courses on these different areas are helping learn your assistive technology applied to these different business softwares is all really just designed to help you succeed in any role that you find yourself in. And as this training is done remotely, it can be a great way to learn some good skills for managing your time learning in a remote environment. And if you want to learn more about Clusive, there will be information in the follow-up email I'll send with the recording. You can also go to our website, www.clusiv.io. It's CLUSIV.io, and learn more, fill out a form. Plus, for being on this webinar, we appreciate your time. And if you want to directly get in touch with us, you can contact Alana and Alana's email. She can put it in the chat here for anybody, and you can chat her directly, or you can send an email to alanna@clusiv.io. So just wanted to share that in case anybody is looking to further their journey in this process. And there's also some contact info on screen that I just kind of went through. But with the remaining time that we have, what questions does anybody have, or questions or comments would love to discuss any topic anybody would like to?